Welcome. Good morning. We are here on RVNTV.tv. It's the Sports Break. I'm your host, Renee Washington, and joining me in studio today is guest and baseball expert, J. Scott Smith. Welcome back. If you guys don't recognize him, he was here before. I know last time, I don't know if you had your hat on or what, but he's back.
Looked a little different the last time. I think it's the glasses are a little different too.
Probably, yes.
Yeah, that's what it comes with age. I have to eventually start to see eventually. So
Yes.
But no, it's as always, it's great to be here.
Yes, and so last time we talked about baseball and we were getting into predictions for the postseason. Here we are in the World Series, 1-1. We're 2 games in, and we have another game tonight.
Mm-hmm.
What did you see in the first 2 games?
Well, it wasn't even as much of a tale of the first 2 games. It was a tale of really the first 16 innings, the entire first game plus the first 7, maybe 7 2/3 of game 2.
Okay.
And then the second part of that very wild sequence starting in the 8th inning of game 2
Right.
on, where if you were like a lot of people and you went to sleep around the end of the 7th inning, top of the 8th inning,
Yeah.
before game 2, you were watching the Astros just get run off the field in Los Angeles, where every time, I mean, the Dodgers, who I admit I thought that they were going to get knocked out in the championship series by the Cubs because the Cubs were the defending champ. I'm always going to go with the defending champ until you can beat them. Well, they beat them, and then they made it look really easy. The first pitch they see in the first World Series they're playing in since 1988, and Chris Taylor hits one of the longest home runs I've ever seen, and it's just, they come out on fire. They win game 1 3-1. Even though the Astros tied the game, Houston was never really in it to begin with. And then you get to game 2, and the most familiar face, of course, for me is Justin Verlander, where I see him doing Justin Verlander things through that whole game, but he gets hit for 2 home runs, which gives me really bad flashbacks to the 2012 World Series when he got caught for 3 of them in San Francisco. But he gives up the 2 home runs. It's 2-1 eventually, 3-1. And yeah, it looked like the Dodgers were just going to walk into Houston at 2-0. And then it just happens. It's just they get the run to get it to 3-2, and then Gonzalez hits the home run and ties it, and it just becomes a madhouse.
Yes.
Going back and forth, late into the night. I hope if you had to work early on Thursday, if you had to work early on Thursday and you had to go to bed and you woke up and you just look around and it's like, wait, it was 3-2 or 3-1 when I went to sleep. Where did this 7-6 thing come from? But the Astros, I give them credit where it's due. They basically turned the Dodgers game on them and just played long ball, where you have the first ever set of back-to-back home runs in an extra inning game. Not only in the postseason but in the World Series. You've got the Astros taking a situation where they were staring down 0-2. Even though they have the next 3 games at home, you don't want to have to put yourself in the position to win essentially 4 out of 5.
Exactly.
And they turn it on its ear. They get their first win, despite the fact that every time they had an answer, the Dodgers come back with an answer. Puig gets a home run, and then Hernandez gets the double to tie it, and then they immediately get the 2-run home run to go back up, and then Culberson hits the home run to get it to 7-6. Albeit he celebrated like he hit a home run to get it to give them the win. That was a little odd, but that was an amazing game. And now this whole thing shifts over to Houston again, where they've got 3 games. If you're the Dodgers, you don't have to see Verlander again until at least game 5.
Exactly.
Either game 5 or game 6, but you don't want to even take that chance now of putting it in his hands again, potentially, say, tied 2-2. Or you're down 3-1 and you've got to stare that man down one more time. And by the way, speaking of former Tigers, there's Cameron Maybin, the guy who ends up scoring the run in front on the home run too. Apparently, Detroit had a championship team and just traded them all. It drives me insane. But this World Series looks like it's setting up to kind of try to match what Chicago and Cleveland did last year.
So then, do you think now, this is for across all sports, when you have a championship series or playoffs, whatever, and you have back-to-back games at home and then back-to-back games on the road, how much does that play a factor into this? I mean, for the Dodgers coming into this, where they haven't been in the World Series in decades.
Yeah, it's been almost 30 years.
You have home field advantage, and you have your fans around you to now, any nerves that you may have, they're there cheering you on. They're supporting you, your family, your friends. They're there. They're not watching from TV, or some of them probably do still fly in. But to have your home field, your home fans around you, in your first appearance in so long. Do you think that might be a reason why the Dodgers came out and they were playing on pure almost adrenaline and then crashed?
The energy in the first game, and I would almost need people to go back and see the highlight of that home run that Taylor hit in the bottom of the first of game 1. I've seen LA fans get hit with a lot of things, that they're late arriving, that they're apathetic. That place exploded when he hit that home run.
Right.
I haven't seen a Los Angeles venue look like that. Even when the Lakers were really good, maybe 15, 16 years ago, was the last time I saw an LA venue go that crazy. They have been itching for this. But now they're going to Houston, where this is Houston's second ever appearance in the World Series, and they got swept 12 years ago. So now they finally get their first win, and now they go to Houston, which has been loud and insane. And I don't believe there's such a thing as momentum between seasons, for example. I don't believe a team gets hot late in the year, even though they're going to lose in the season, so they're going to take off into the next year. But in best of 7 series like this, and you see it in the NBA, you'll see it in Major League Baseball, you see it in the NHL, momentum between games is key.
Right.
Where the Dodgers had everything, and then the bullpen let it get away.
Right.
So now everything now it shifts over to the Astros, where they have to try to build off of that, where they were basically, they scored 2 runs in the first 16 innings, and then all of a sudden they rip off they rip off 6 runs in 3 innings time and hit home runs all over the place. And you have Jose Altuve, who might be 5'2", hitting these bombs all over the place now. So the Astros, it's their turn. They have to try to silence this, because the Cubs are not the Cubs, but the Dodgers come off that series where they go to Chicago, to Wrigley Field, which is supposed to be, and is, this loud madhouse of a place, and they instantly shut it down, silenced them.
Right.
The Dodgers are built for going into a place like Houston and quieting people and shutting them up, but because they do not want to let this thing snowball.
Right.
Because again, the last thing you need is to have a 5th game, and hello, Justin Verlander, he's waiting on you. And aside from 2 bad pitches, he basically turned them inside out during game 2. So Houston knows that the ball is in their court. It's their serve. I'm going to use a tennis term. It's their serve right now. So they have to make sure they don't mess around and get broken by the Dodgers, who, if they took out the world champs, taking out Houston, even though Houston is a 101-win team and is just light years ahead of what the Cubs were, they want this opportunity. They want to win this championship. They'll have to go into Houston and get at least 1 game, probably 2, to make sure that they're not in any sort of real trouble or real danger going back to Los Angeles. Because the series is going to go back to Los Angeles.
It is.
It's not going to end in Houston.
Well, it's a lot to take in, because the World Series, especially more than any other sport, you don't always have, you don't have the same pitcher.
No.
So that's in itself is different. Whereas in basketball or any other sport, you have your same players, unless there's an injury that happens. So every game, you're not worried about, okay, well, this person's out, so who else is going to step in? No, you have your entire starting lineup, or whatever changes we make. You have your entire roster. Baseball, you don't. So after this break, we're going to get into a little bit more about just how much pitching plays a factor into what will happen in the World Series. Don't go too far. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Sports Break here on RVNTV.tv. I'm your host, Renee Washington, and joining me to talk about the Dodgers, the Astros, and the World Series is J. Scott Smith. So we were just talking about the first 2 games, which, again, if you fell asleep at the end of Game 2, you basically missed the entire game. But going forward, Game 3, we're now going to be in Houston. What is going to be happening, or how much will pitching affect both of these teams?
Well, pitching is the main reason why both the Dodgers and Astros got here to begin with. And, I mean, obviously, the last game notwithstanding, the Dodgers' bullpen is what helped them be able to change the trajectory of what they would do. Where for years their big issue was they had the starting pitching. They would have a guy like Kershaw, they would have Zach Greinke, who's now in Arizona, and they would have this great starting pitching, but they couldn't close games out.
Right.
Now they have they're built for, instead of being a 7 inning or 8 inning start, they're built for a 6 inning game. Like what happened with Game 1, where Kershaw only needed to go 6 innings. You hand it off to that bullpen, and the Astros could do nothing with them. The 2 changes that you're going to notice is that, one, obviously, with the scene shift, you're going to still have to worry about pitching, whether it's Darvish and McCullers for Houston. But you also now have, and this is I admit, I grew up in an American League city, and it's still a little odd seeing that the Houston Astros are an American League team because that's a National League team. I don't care what anybody says. And now you also have the American League rules. So that changes how you handle a pitching staff because you no longer have to worry about the pitcher batting in the National League Stadium. You're in an American League park, so now here comes the designated hitter, meaning you can stretch a pitcher out one extra inning if you want to. You can hold off on running that reliever out there in the 6th, maybe run him out there in the 7th. That's the biggest part of this is that, and that's why I love that they interchange the rules. A lot of people are like, oh, why don't you just have one uniform set of rules? Like, no, I love the fact that in the National League, there's a lot more strategy to it in a National League game where you might have a pitcher going really well, but you may get to the 6th inning and you have to run into that issue of, do I leave him out there to hit one more time, or do I pull him, pinch hit for him, but now I know I'm committed to having to go to my bullpen and I've got that hot hand off the field now. In the American League, a guy like Verlander, who's pitched in the AL his whole career, he can go 7, 8, 9 innings if he wants to because he doesn't have to worry about having to get up there and bat. There's not a risk of him getting hurt, and you don't have to tactically change things. The Dodgers are going to have to adjust to the atmosphere.
Okay.
Their starting pitcher for Game 3 is Yu Darvish. He pitched for the Texas Rangers for most of the season, so he's pitched in Houston before. He knows that atmosphere. He knows that environment. He knows what he's getting himself into. Some of these guys, this might be the first time they're seeing the Astros or seeing Houston since they went over to the American League. So it's a different animal for them. And again, a lot of these guys have not been in World Series games. Aside from, and this is on both teams. You have players like Chase Utley, the former Philly, Chase Utley, who's in Los Angeles, or you've got Verlander, who pitched in Detroit and was with 2 World Series teams, or you've got guys on both sides here who played. Carlos Beltran, who plays for the Astros, has played on multiple World Series teams. But then you also have all these rookies, all these young guys. This is their first time around for guys like Chris Taylor and Turner and Altuve and Marwin Gonzalez. And these guys are coming up big. George Springer coming up big, hitting these big home runs. And this is their first time in games like this. And even though they rode out a 7-game series against the Yankees in the championship series, World Series is a different animal. As we saw in Game 2, every out matters, every pitch matters, every AB matters. You don't want to walk a guy. Verlander basically only gave up 2 hits. Both of them were home runs. And the second one was the kill shot for him because he walked a guy and then gave up a home run. You can't walk anybody. You can't screw around out there and put yourself in a position where one bad pitch does it. One bad pitch will send that momentum heading right back in the other direction.
Right.
And for the Dodgers, if they want to win this series, they want to win that. If they want to come back and win the world title, they have to get, obviously, at least one. It would be of their best interest to somehow find a way to get 2 out of 3 in Houston, which is not going to be easy because the Astros haven't lost a home game the entire postseason.
So the tough thing is here, with any championship series, with every game being so important, and you needing to win at home as much as possible, the Dodgers had a chance to go up 2-0 going into Houston, which would have given them that momentum we talk about, which would have given them that lead. And now, instead of it being 1-1 and still being anyone's series, it's 2-0, and you force the Astros to have to win 3 straight.
It's not, and not unlike the NBA or back when they used to have that rule where it was the 2-3-2.
Right.
That always will work in the favor of the home team, almost always work in the favor of the home team in baseball. I will go back to this. In 2006, when Detroit gets to the World Series, they just stormed through the American League playoffs. Verlander was in his first really full season in the league at this point. Tigers have stormed through the AL. They've lost all of 1 game this whole run through the playoffs. They lost 1 game to the Yankees, swept Oakland. They rolled into the World Series, lost the first game at home to St. Louis. Now they win the second game.
Right.
But then they have to go to St. Louis, and instead of going to St. Louis up 2-0, they go there 1-1. Cardinals win the next 3 games, win the series 4-1.
Exactly.
You don't want to mess around in a situation like what the Dodgers did, where it was right there. Now, I would say they're a young team, but they're both young teams.
Right.
It's not like you're gonna. It's not like one's gonna be overwhelmed by youth. And there are some other. And I mentioned another one, Brian McCann, the catcher for the Astros.
Right.
He played on playoff teams in Atlanta and with the Yankees. So he's used to being in. Their guys are used to being in situations like this that will keep them even keel. The Game 3 in a best of 7 series is always pivotal, and I won't say who wins Game 3 will win the series because last year Cleveland won Game 3, and we know how that ended. And but the idea that you have to make sure you can shake this off, it would be at the Dodgers' best interest not to mess around in Houston and figure out a way to shake off giving away a golden opportunity to go up 2-0. Because in best of 7 series like that, a loss of that scale, especially at home, can tilt things in a whole different direction for you if you're not mentally ready to handle that.
And that's the biggest thing. I mean, youth, no youth, regardless, having that advantage of winning on the road, because you're going to have to win on the road. Any team that wins a championship has to win at least one on the road, obviously. You have to find a way to pull out those wins, such as Game 2. And for the Dodgers, they didn't do it. And now it is kind of a toss-up. If they don't win this next game, and definitely Game 4, that's it.
You don't want to go down 3-1.
No.
I mean, not everybody is going to be able to pull the whole we're down 3-1 thing and then rip off 3 in a row.
Exactly.
Albeit if the Dodgers were to come back down 3-1, at least they know they would have 2 games at home, unlike the Cubs who had to go to Cleveland last year and do this. It's just, and you mentioned something about the winning on the road thing. That is a very key thing. I see a Yankee jersey hanging here in the background. The Yankees won all 3 games they played against the Astros in Yankee Stadium. Made it look easy in a couple of them. They couldn't get 1 win in Houston, and they gave away 2 games there. You cannot rely on just winning at home, especially when you don't have home field. Exactly. This was the first time since the American League Championship Series went to 7 games in 1985 that the home team won all 7 games. You can't rely on that at all times. You've got to be able to figure out a way to get one. There's 205 wins between these 2 teams. You would think at some point each one would get one on the other's home field. You would assume, but now even though it's 1-1, it's advantage Houston, knowing they've got 3 at their place, and they got 3 at their place. They've got essentially the wind at their back of not having to deal with that ridiculous heat in LA. The AL rules kind of even things out a little bit for both sides because now you get an extra batter in there. But the Astros now really hold the key to this. They go up 2-1, they force the Dodgers onto their heels and force them into a really tough situation. The Dodgers get up 2-1, we're right back to basically where we were supposed to be anyway.
All right, so after this break, we will get into who you think is going to win and why. See your prediction, and then maybe, just maybe, you'll be right. We don't know. But we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the Sports Break here on RVNTV.tv. I'm your host, Renee Washington, and joining me to break down the World Series at 1-1, the Houston Astros and the Dodgers, is J. Scott Smith. So we talked about what happened in the first 2 games. We've talked about pitching and how it affects the game. We've also talked about home field advantage, which is huge in a 7-game series. But now, here we are, getting ready for Game 3. Who do you think is going to win the entire series?
Going into this series, I picked the Dodgers to win this series. And I figured it would be the Dodgers in 6 games. Only because of Houston having the slight lack of experience. I felt that apples to apples, the pitching staffs were almost dead even. But it would be 2 things. It would be the bullpen. It would be the bullpen and it would be the offense. And as much as the Astros like to hit the ball all over the place, as we saw Game 2, the Dodgers can answer that. So I felt that only because of the home field situation that I would give the slight edge to Los Angeles. And I'm going to stick with that. Initially, I said it was going to be Los Angeles in 6 games. It might move up to Dodgers in 7. That we're probably going to get the same scenario we got last year with Chicago and Cleveland, where they're going to go down to the wire, except this time it's going to be in Dodger Stadium as opposed to Jacobs Field in Cleveland. And this time the home team ends up walking out with the championship, but this won't be easy. And this could all get blown up. The Dodgers could just as easily walk into Houston and win all 3 games, and what happened in Game 2 means nothing. Or Houston could win all 3 games and just walk away with it. it's just, I have a feeling that no one team is going to be distinctively better than the other. Because that second game told you a lot about these two, because not only were the Dodgers up and then Houston goes on this home run barrage, but they had an answer every single time.
Yes.
This is not going to be one of those where one walks over the other. They were able to answer back. So that's where I give the slight edge to the Dodgers on this one. As sorry, Justin Verlander, the idea of him getting a world title out of Detroit does kind of bug me a little bit. But if it's going to be one team, it's got to be the Dodgers, but only because they have home field, because they're about as evenly matched as two teams as I've seen in years in the World Series.
Interesting. Well, we're going to hold you to it. But also, you mentioned the amount of home runs that there were. There were a historical amount of home runs in Game 2. Game 1, the Dodgers were more dominant. What is the storyline that you think we're going to see growing here? I mean, as we get into Game 3, and now both teams are settling in, you talk about the youth that they have. You talk about the fact that both teams are playing in a World Series since at least 12 years ago, and even longer for the Dodgers. All those things are now kind of behind you. Any nerves, any cobwebs, whatever you want to call it, the excuses, I should say, are done. We're getting into Game 3. For the rest of the series, what do you predict will be the storyline that we're going to see emerge?
Pitching. It's been pitching. These first two, a save for, of course, now that I think about it, pitching mattered even in those extra innings, because the Dodgers were unable to keep the ball in the yard after the 8th inning. That's a big deal, because up until those first 16 innings, the Dodgers basically had the Astros. They were leading them by the nose all over the place. Houston couldn't get anything going. They'd get a runner on, and it would just immediately be wasted either with a double play or you just simply strike out the next two guys. The Astros saved for the home run bug catching them between Keuchel giving up the home run to open the game, gave up a second one later on. Verlander gets popped for 2 home runs. There were 8 home runs hit in Game 2. That's all pitching, but in a different sense.
That makes sense.
You have to be able to avoid the long ball. Which staff is going to be able to avoid that long ball coming back and biting them? Because if you can keep it in the yard, you're going to win. This is not some Minnesota Twins set up get a couple of guys on, bunt a guy over, he comes around and scores. No, this is one guy gets on, the next ball is gone.
Yeah.
You have to keep guys off base, and you certainly cannot keep giving up home runs. If I'm seeing that pitcher turn around and look back, there's a problem. Pitching is going to be the biggest key. It's the key to every series like this. But starting pitching, and especially that bullpen, because the next time the Dodgers have a lead late in the game and they got to go to Jansen, who's one of the best closers in all of Major League Baseball, where's his head going to be? Because the World Series has turned great closers and great relief pitchers into total goats by making one simple mistake. Some Hall of Fame guys have had their whole lives made or ruined in postseason play, and especially in the World Series. So that's going to be the biggest thing for me, is how does the pitching stand up into the immediate? How does the Dodger bullpen respond to getting beaten like a piñata for the final 4 innings of that game in Game 2, and watching what should be a 2-0 lead just get blown up in their face?
Yeah. Now, before we wrap up the show, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, one player, or 2, I'll give you some leeway, from each team, not just pitchers, that you think is going to step up and make a big play, or just step up and be the one that kind of carries each team.
I would say right now for the Dodgers, a guy I would certainly keep an eye on, one way or the other, is Yasiel Puig. He hit the home run. He hit the home run in the 10th inning of the second game. He's been even when he doesn't reach base, he's been all over the ball. He's been much more locked in and zoned in than he has been really in his career. So all of his weirdness with his licking of the baseball bat and doing push-ups and pimping it on singles and doubles instead of on home runs, all that you can live with, because this guy is that good. And he shows you, not only that, defensively, he's got maybe the best arm in baseball. Where there was a point in the second game where a fly ball comes into him and there's a runner at second base. I think it was Barman Gonzalez. And Gonzalez knew better than to even it was Gurriel. He knew better to take one step off that base.
Right.
By the time he took one half step away from the base, the ball was already back in to the infield. And Puig just stares him down. And just don't try me. So if it's going to be one player for the Dodgers, it's going to be Puig. If it's going to be one player for the Astros, I would take a look at George Springer, the center fielder, who hit the big home run that ended up being the difference in Game 2. he's one of the best pure players and one of the best pure hitters in the league. And he's still relatively young.
Right.
And he's on a team that has a guy who's going to probably be the MVP in Jose Altuve. But George Springer, he bats near the top of that order. He is going to be a problem. And again, just like Puig defensively, if it's not 10 feet over his head going into the seats, he's likely going to make the play on it. So those are the two guys I would say, Puig for the Dodgers and Springer for the Astros. Those two. I mean, of all the other good players, those are the two who could be they're the straws that stir the drinks down there in Texas and probably back in Southern California within the next few days.
Well, there you have it. There's your J. Scott Smith's predictions for who he thinks going to win, what he thinks will happen, from the word of JSS himself.
But this is entertainment. This is entertainment purposes only. Do not come looking for me if you dare to put money up on this.
Yeah, don't take this with a grain of salt.
Please take this with a grain of salt. This is Philly. This is not Atlantic City or Vegas. We're not doing that.
Yes, we do need to preface it with that. But also, thank you for joining us. For those of you that do not know, he is actually starting his own baseball show. He's branching out from Peter
I'm joining the family. It'll be November 4th. It'll be called J. Scott Confidential. It's the JSC in my podcast. JSC Radio stands for J. Scott Confidential, and that's what we're going to be calling the show. It's going to be a little bit of everything. It's going to be baseball. Obviously, we're going into football, basketball season, and going to take more of a humorous kind of offbeat look at it as well. And yes, there will be guests, and yes, we'll get serious from time to time, but we're going to have some fun on some Saturdays to kind of get you through your weekend and get you into whether it's college football or whatever it is you're trying to do on a Saturday or a Sunday. This is what I'm here for. I'm here to help.
Yeah, so stay tuned for his show here on rvntv.tv. But for the sports break, thanks for joining us. You can always check us out through the week. So we're the weekday show. Tuesday, Thursday, Friday morning at 9 a.m. right here on rvntv.tv. I'm your host, Renee Washington, with J. Scott Smith, and we hope you have a great weekend.